Everybody, this is Don Lloyd, and I'd like to record a quick tutorial video that kind of coincides with the longer tutorial video that I put on Board Game Geek a couple years back. This video itself is going to emphasize on the basics of the gameplay behind Dark Horse so players can get right to playing the game. So on that note, let's talk about Dark Horse. Dark Horse is a dice Euro game with some resource management in it. You can also play different characters with variable player powers, and there's some other aspects to the game. The thematics behind the game are that you're a wealthy land baron coming to Dark Horse County, and you're trying to build out the best town-city rail network and gain the most influence and victory points. The objective of the game is to have the most victory points at the end. And one thing I want to stress is that this game has very low scoring. So the average scoring may be 15 to 25 points. So anything that can gain you victory points is very important. If you can collect a little extra gold or you can collect influence, it's recommended that you do, because sometimes the winner of the game can be separated by just as few as 2 or 3 points. So on that note, let's talk about the phases in Dark Horse. There are only 2 phases. There is a placement phase and a collection phase. The placement phase is simply everyone rolling the dice that they have access to and then taking turns placing them on action spaces. Now you'll notice you have 3 dice, but normally you only roll 2 dice during your turn. There are actions and cards in the game that can give you a bonus die. You'll notice that the hired hand action space, which is number 2, offers you the capability to collect a bonus die in the next turn. So once again, this bonus die will allow you to roll 3 dice instead of 2. So as I mentioned before, you take turns placing on one action, and then once all the dice have been placed, you go ahead and you claim those. You go to the collection phase. So in the collection phase, you always start on the turn order. So you're going to go ahead and start on the turn order. You're going to claim any dice here, go up to the dealer, and then you're going to proceed to the right, and then all the way down the side on the right. So that's how you collect up from the action spaces. It's a very specific order. And that's it. Those are the 2 phases of the game. That's about as complicated as the game gets. You're rolling dice and you're taking an action. And then you pick up your dice off that action and you claim the action. The only other complexity to the game is understanding, what do these action spaces do for me? You also have to understand how you place cities, towns, and rails onto the board. But the majority of the game is rolling dice. So let's go ahead and talk about the territory map in general. You'll notice that there is the territory map with many different hexes on the board. You'll notice that underneath these resource hexes are these dashed outlines. These dashed outlines are where all the resource hexes go. So when you very first start the game out, you're going to randomize all these tiles. You want to take out 4 ore resource hexes. And it doesn't matter what kind they are. You'll notice that some of these hex tiles say rugged on them. You'll also notice that some of the areas on the board say rugged as well. So we'll talk about rugged resource hexes in a little bit, but what's important now is that you take those 4 ore resource hexes out and place them in the position that's shown. From there, you go ahead and randomize all the rest of the resource hexes, place them face down, and put them in these hex spots that have the dashed outline. And the board is set up at that point. So the other thing you need to do is you want to go ahead and determine turn order, and you want to place the pawns in turn order. Now the pawns are used for a 2-player variant called Gunslinger, which is in the back of the book. I have another set of round disc markers that you can use if you're playing that variant, but I find that the pawns are a little bit easier and they're more attractive to use on the board. You'll notice that if I push these pawns to the side, these spots correspond to the different numbers. So purple's in first turn order, green is in second turn order, and so on. So that is the basics behind turn order. You'll also notice that there's an influence track, and there's some discs here. So when someone gains influence, they just simply go up the track. And influence turns into a victory point at the end of the game. So the other pieces of setup are going to be placing your first city, then your towns, and then the free rail. Now, in reverse turn order, players will place down their very first city. As you can see in this example, blue is the very last in turn order. So in reverse turn order, blue would place their city first. Now, cities can only go on empty or blank resource hexes. So a city can go here, 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 here. It can go on any non-resource hex, whereas a town can only go on a resource hex. But let's talk about cities for a little bit first. What does a city do for you? Well, it gives you access to every hex around it. It doesn't give you control of the hexes around it, only gives you access. So that means that I can place a town on the resource hexes around my city. So let's go ahead and do that. Now you'll notice that 2 of these hexes are pre-printed on the game board, which means that they're safe zones. A player will always know what those resources are. So when you very first start out the game, it's important to place in these positions because you want the chance to have the best diverse mix of resources as you can. Because there's food, wood, and ore in the game, and all 3 of those resources are used to build towns, cities, and rails. So if you got stuck in the middle of the game board, say somewhere here, and you were surrounded just by wood, then you would have a more difficult time trying to play that out. And our goal for this first game is just to make you understand the basic core mechanisms in the game. So once again, this city will give you access to every hex around it. And the city is also a spot where you extend your rails. And we'll talk about rails in a little bit. But let's go ahead and focus on towns. Towns go on resource hexes. So I can go ahead and place there. And I can also place on this blank or this face down hidden resource hex. Now you'll notice that that resource hex is rugged. Now rugged just simply means you have to pay 1 additional ore if you want to place on a resource hex that's rugged. Now in the initial setup, when you first start the game, you ignore that penalty. So it's in your best interest to try to uncover any of these resource hexes that are face down. It's because you'll bypass that penalty of rugged. And that's what we've done here. So all towns really do for you is they capture the resources that are underneath them. So now that I'm on food and ore, I can produce both of those resources. I don't have a town on wood. So if I go to produce resources off that specific action, I can't say wood because I don't have a town on it. The next thing we want to talk about are rails. Now, in turn order, you place your cities first, then your 2 towns, and then you place your free rail. And then that would end the setup on the board. So rails have to come out of a city like this. So they can come out of a city, or they can be placed on the line surrounding a city. So you can place it on one of the lines surrounding the city, come out of the city, or it can also go on the end of another rail that you have access to. So for example, later in the game, I can place a rail here. And then that would also give me access to that additional ore resource hex on the right-hand side. So that's how you place your rails down. Now, I've had people confused in the past thinking that they could place the rails coming out of their towns, which they cannot. Like I said, rails have to come out of the city, surround the city, or on the end of a rail that's coming out of one of your cities. So this is illegal. That's the basics behind cities, towns, and rails. Now, the only other thing I need to mention is if you want to place another city down, there are some restrictions. There's even some restrictions on how close the opponents can place their first initial city beside each other. When you very first start the game, you have to be 2 empty hexes away. So in this example, this would be illegal for the purple player to try to do. He's only 1 hex away. He has to be at least 2. So the closest he could probably get is right there. He is 1, 2 hexes away. Now once the game starts, players can get 1 hex away. This is legal once the game started. But just remember initially when you first start the game and you're placing down your first cities and towns, players can't crowd each other in. The other thing you need to know is that another restriction on a city is that it has a rail on the outside of the hex. So, for example, if the blue player wanted to place a city here, that would be an illegal play because he has to have a rail on one of the sides of that hex to make it legal. As long as you have a rail on the side, you're 1 hex away, then you can place that city. And what that city is going to do is it's going to give you access to all of the hexes around it. So now I have access to build on this town. I already have access to this town because this rail is connecting. And that gives you an example of some of the basics behind the towns and cities and rails. Now, one important thing to note is that the game is based around victory points. Well, a big portion of how you'll gain victory points in this game is by your cities. Each city is worth as many towns connected to it by rail. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to fast forward this a little bit, and I'm going to pretend that we're in the later portions of the game, and we have some towns on these resource hexes surrounding it, and we've also built up some of our infrastructure on our rails. So we're going to place rails here, here, and here. Now, if you go ahead and look at the blue city on the right side, you'll notice that it can trace a path back to every town, as can the city on the left. It can trace a path back. It's connected to every town. If I were to have neglected to put, say, a rail here, then all of a sudden the city on the right cannot trace a path back to these two cities or two towns over here. So it's important that you're fully connected. And that means each city will score the most points. So in this example, this city's worth 5 and this city's worth 5. And that's how you score a majority of your points in Dark Horse. The other way you can score is influence and also collecting gold. Every gold is worth a victory point, and having the special role of either mayor or sheriff is worth 1 victory point. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the next thing we want to cover is the action spaces themselves. We've talked about placement phase, the collection phase, so let's go ahead and talk about the generic capabilities of action spaces. All right, you'll notice that there are 2 different types or 2 different colors of action spaces. The turn order and dealer, for example, have a bluish color with a dashed outline, whereas some of the others have no dashed outline and they're brown in the background. The blue action spaces mean that they're unlimited. Any number of players can take the dealer action, for example. Any number of players can take the pioneer action and collect cards. The brown action spaces are limited, meaning that only 1 player can claim them, except for in the situation with the produced resources. You'll notice that it says reserved up in the corner, just meaning it has some special rules. A person can only take 1 of the specific spots on there. And we'll talk about the produced resources in a few seconds. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk about turn order. You'll notice that turn order, as I mentioned before, has these numbers which denote the actual turn order position that that player is in. You'll also notice on the right hand side there's a 3+ icon. So that means if anyone is sick of being 3rd or 4th or last in turn order, they simply place one of their dice that are 3 or higher on this top position. And when we come back around and resolve this, then all of a sudden the blue player is going to go all the way to the top and push everyone back down. Now another player can come back around and place on a position a little bit lower so they can preserve that they have 2nd place, but normally it's just usually 1 player. The other thing you can do, you can use dealer, and dealer allows you to plus or minus 1 die or take out a loan. You'll notice that in the lower left corner there is an icon that shows a question mark on a die. That means you can use any die for this. You can use 1 through 6. It doesn't matter. So for example, I can place a 2 on here, and that means I'm going to claim the dealer action. So maybe I'm going to use that to plus 1 of my dice. So let's pretend that I rolled a 7. I really want to take the 6th action space, which is the builder. So what I do is I place that 2 in there, and I can plus or minus 1 of those dice. Well, I'm going to plus that 5 result, and I'm going to change it into a 6. Now, I don't physically change the die. I'm just allowing that die to be in a different spot. And in the rule book, I mentioned just to put a wild die token on these spots. And then that denotes that it's been modified somehow. So that's the first power on the dealer action. The other thing you can do is you can take out a loan token. And the loan token allows you to claim any 3 resources. So let's go ahead and see if we can't zoom up on that. So the loan says take any 3 resources, pay back loan with 6 resources on or before the game end, or you receive -1 victory points. So in essence, it allows you to gain any 3 resources. So if you're surrounded by wood in the dead center of the map and you can't gain access to food or ore, then you can use a loan to go ahead and claim the resources that you need. That's why the loans are important. Now, if we're going to talk about tokens, limited tokens, we need to talk about the limitations to limited tokens. So food, ore, and wood and gold, they are items that you can have as many as you want. Whereas the loans and wild die tokens, the stock tokens, the engineer tokens, even the barrels for the trader token, they're all limited tokens. So there's this concept of limited, which simply means I can have as many limited tokens as I have cities. So currently, this blue player has 2 blue cities. Means that they can have 2 loans. They could have 2 wild die tokens. Now, when you first start out the game, you only have 1 city, so you have to be careful about how many tokens you have. So you don't want to sit on your wild die token, and people will learn that right away. Your wild die token allows you to plus or minus a die, allows you to re-roll your dice, and we'll talk about that in a second. But what's important here is that you don't sit on that token. You want to go ahead and use it, because every time you roll doubles, you'll gain a wild die token. But you can only hold on to as many tokens of these types as you have cities. So if you already have a wild die token and you roll doubles, you're not going to get the benefit of it. So you have to be very careful to use these tokens before you max out the number you have on cities. So let's go ahead and move on. One last thing about the dealer action is you'll notice that there's a little lightning bolt icon in the upper right corner. And that just basically means you're going to go ahead and do that action space right away. So you'll bypass the collection phase and immediately do it. Whenever you see a lightning icon on a card or an action space, it means do it immediately. And on that same note, you'll notice that the loan tokens themselves actually have a lightning icon on it, which means take those resources right away. You don't delay in deciding what resources you're going to take from the loan token. You do it immediately. So let's go ahead and move on to the produce resources action space. So the produce resources action space has a lot of icons on it. It looks like there's a lot going on, but it all makes sense once I describe it. As I mentioned before, it's a limited action space. It has a little reserved banner in the upper left corner, which just denotes there's some restrictions on it. And the main thing to remember is that you can produce resources on these, and they come in the form of rows. So this is the wood row, this is the ore row, and this is the food row. So this icon, and this icon all pertain to wood. So if I wanted to claim wood, then I just put an any die in that position. And that's also why you see these icons, the any die icons. It means this area allows you to put any die result of 1 through 6. Whereas this side it denotes additional effort. So if I were to put say a 6 on this spot, then I would produce my wood and I would get 1 additional. Now, the concept of producing resources is based upon how many towns you have on that resource hex. So in this example, you can see that I have a town here and a town here on wood. I'm going to produce 2 wood resources. If I use the additional effort, I'll produce 3 because it's always +1. So that's one thing you need to remember. Now, as I mentioned, these are specific rows. I can only use 1 of each type or 1 of each row. So this is illegal here. I cannot place 3 dice on wood. I can, however, place dice on each row. So I can produce food, ore, and wood as long as I have towns on those resource hexes. And that is the only restriction. So moving on, we're going to talk about Pioneer. Now you'll notice that there is an icon there that has a die with a single pip on each side. That simply means you have to have a 1. It has to be a natural die roll. You can't use dealer or some of the other tokens that happen later in the game. You have to have a natural die roll of 1. And then the question mark, of course, is an any die. So any other die and 1 will get you the ability to claim the Pioneer action. It's unlimited, so as many players who are playing can use this. If there's ever a question of who should draw cards first, refer to turn order. So what you do is, once you claim this, you simply draw 2 cards. So I'm going to go ahead and let's use these cards right here. So I'm going to go ahead and draw these 2 cards. So I have Shay's Saloon and Dirty Deals. Now for this tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and ignore all of these special icons in the right side of the card. There's some different things that happen in there, but the only special icon we're going to be dealing with in this tutorial is that lightning bolt icon. So each of these are action cards, and there's another type of card in here called an event card, which has a different look to it. But let's go ahead and resolve this. So I'm going to keep one of these cards, and I'm going to discard the other. So I'm going to go ahead and take Shay's Saloon, which says pay 1 gold for 2 influence points, and then later on that could be a bump in victory points for me. So I'm going to go ahead and discard Dirty Deals and keep Shay's Saloon. You can also pull event cards. So for example, this is a drought, and it's an event card. You'll notice that it says event right here, and then it has a little lightning bolt symbol right here. So this card, whenever it comes into play, or I should say whenever any event comes into play, it plays immediately. So you'll have to place this drought into play, and I've got a handy dandy event marker that will go on the action space that this affects. So we're going to go ahead and place this on the builder, because essentially what the drought does is it says building a town costs 1 additional food. So now towns cost 3 food and 1 wood. And this event will stay in play until another event replaces it. There's only ever 1 event. If you ever draw 2 events, you go ahead, discard those, reshuffle everything, and you draw again. So whenever you draw 2 or more events, you go ahead and do that. You can never take the Pioneer and Scout and not claim a card. Now, the timing for cards and tokens is whenever you pick up your dice. Right now, at this very second, I'm claiming the Pioneer action space, and I'm going to go ahead and pick up these dice. Well, that's my timing for doing everything. If I want to use a stock token, an engineer token, if I want to play one of my cards, I can go ahead and do that now. And then it's going to come back around to other players. So you're always limited to right before or after you pick up your dice. And I'll talk about that a little bit later in more detail. So let's move on to the next action space, which is the hired hand. You'll notice that in the bottom left corner is a number versus a symbol for a die. It just means that any combination of dice that result in that number will allow me to claim that action. So in this example, 2 1s or a 2 is the only way that I can claim this action. However, since it's not a natural die roll, like politics on the right side, that means that I can use the dealer action or a wild die token to go ahead and adjust this. So I can turn a 3 back down into a 2 and claim it. What this is going to do for me is it's going to give me a bonus die next turn in the top of the placement phase. So normally I would only roll 2 dice, but next turn I would roll 3 dice, and that's a one-time benefit. After that placement phase, you go back down to 2 dice, unless of course you've claimed another bonus die. So the next thing we want to talk about is politics and work crew and some of these other actions here. So politics, it's a natural die roll, which simply means I have to have a 3 unless I use some other special type of token that's allowed. Currently, there's only one other token that allows you to bypass the natural die roll penalty, and that is the engineer token. It has a little anvil on it, and we'll talk about that in a second. So I place a 3 there, and I must pay any one resource, and then I'll go up 1 on the influence track. So I pay 1, and I'll go up. Going on to the work crew, produce resources on 2 hex types. Basically what you do with this action space is you announce 2 hex types. So I can say something like food and wood. And let's pretend I had towns on food and wood here. And that were my only towns, for example. I would produce 2 food and 1 wood. And that's the benefit of the work crew, that whatever 2 resource hex types you announce, you're going to produce off those. Now, early on, the power of the work crew it's not that powerful. But later in the game, when you have, say, for example, 3 towns on food and 2 on wood, you're going to produce 5 resources off 1 die. So just think of it as a late game tactic to use the work crew. And thematically, that's because you're using a work crew to help you out with some of these extra resources. Let's move on to Rail Baron. Once again, you have to have a 5. So you place a 5 on this, and you also pay 2 ore and a food, and you'll get 2 rails, and 2 of the black rails that are shown here. So you must place these right away. It's not as if you're building the rails and then putting them in a pile. Your citizens are going out and they're actually putting the rails in place. You'll also notice that in the upper left corner is a symbol that shows in a 4-player game, 2 players can place on this, which means I could come back around and say the purple player could go ahead and claim this action as well. 2 players can claim either the Rail Baron or the Builder action in a 4-player game. So let's move on. Next is the Builder. So the Builder is going to allow you to build a town or a city. For 2 food and a wood, you can build a town, or for gold and 4 wood, you can build a city. Now this is an or condition. You can only build one or the other. You also can't build, say, 2 towns or 2 cities. You can only claim from this once, and that's exactly how the action spaces all work. I can only produce food on the produce resources action space once. I can only claim 1 influence point from politics. Just remember, you can only ever benefit from 1 specific thing off each action space. Let's go to Trader. On a 7 or 8, I can take a trade. So pay any 4 resources and take 1 gold, or I can take any 2 other resources. Now you can break this up. You can put, say, 3 food and a wood as the payment, and then take an ore and another food, if it makes sense. But you can do any of these. It doesn't have to be the same. It doesn't have to be 4 food for 2 ore. It can be 4 food, 4 ore, and a wood. Just remember that. We're going to move on to the Engineer and the Scout. Now the Engineer, once again, is a 7 and 8 action space. So it's going to allow you to go +1 in turn order. That means just moving up 1. So say you're in the 4th turn order position. All you're going to do is go up to the 3rd turn order position. It's not like claiming turn order where you go to the very top. It's just moving up 1 spot. This will also give you an Engineer token and a Wild Die token. So let's go ahead in detail. Let's talk about both of these tokens. So we have got the Wild Die token here. And basically what this is going to let me do is re-roll 1, 2, or 3 dice, or I can take the +- action. So the Wild Die token is essentially acts like a dealer. So a dealer, it can plus or minus. Now you can't take over the natural die rolls. That's restricted, but it will let you to take, like, say, the Builder. You can put this on a 5 and make that 5 take over the Builder. You can also use this to reroll your dice, and that's mainly what I've experienced in the game. Most players will use this to reroll their dice. That's the most beneficial aspect to it. Now you've got the Engineer token, and you'll notice that all of the limited tokens have the instructions on the very back. So the Engineer token will allow you to share a non-restricted action, or you can, what does that say? Change a die to any number. So this is the only way that you can bypass that natural die roll. So if I roll a 1, I can use an Engineer token to change that 1 into anything I want. I can change it into a 5 and claim the Rail Baron. It's the only thing in the game that lets you bypass the natural die roll. You can also share a non-restricted space. So for example, in a 3-player game, if someone had claimed the Builder, I would have been locked out. but I can use an engineer to share the spot with them. Now it said non-restricted space, right? You'll notice that here on the mayor that it has a restricted banner. So you can't share the mayor or the sheriff action space, just to let you know. Moving on to the scout. The scout is going to let you draw cards. So you draw 3 cards and you place 2 back on top of the deck face down. You get to keep 1. Now the benefit to this, and the reason that it's a higher number, is that you get to, you know what those 2 cards are. So you know if they're bad or if they're good. You can actually hold back and take the action right away to draw some more cards if they have a really good card or not. The other benefit is this little hex and eyeball, which allows you to pick out one of these hexes that are face down and peek at it. And that is the benefit of the scout action. Going down to the mayor and sheriff, these are the 2 action spaces that allow you to take over a special role. Now, as I mentioned before, having a special role at the end of the game will give you a victory point. You can only ever have 1 special role. You cannot be the sheriff and mayor at the same time. If you're the mayor and you take the sheriff action space, then you turn the mayor back in and you become the sheriff. So just know that you can only ever have 1 of these. So let's talk about the mayor. The mayor is going to give you an influence point. So you'll go up on the influence track. You're going to take any 1 resource and you're going to claim the mayor key. What the mayor key allows you to do, it allows you to ignore the payment on politics. So normally you'd have to pay 1 resource to take politics. If you're the mayor, you get to play in the political arena for free. Now let's move on to sheriff. Sheriff allows you to go first in turn order, and that's this little symbol here. You'll notice that ties up into the first turn order icon. And then you'll also claim the sheriff token, as well as the silver deputy die. Now what you do with the silver deputy die is, say for example, you normally only have 2 dice. You're going to replace one of those dice with the silver deputy die. It doesn't change how many dice you have, it just changes one of your dice into a special die. And when I say special die, I mean this die has a power on it. So after you roll your dice, you have the ability to flip the die. So right now it's currently a 1. I can flip it 180 degrees to the other side. So I can turn a 1 into a 6. I can turn something like a 2 into a 5. And you'll learn early on that that's very beneficial to get the natural die rolls. Now there's one caveat. If you ever flip the die, you can't use it with the other dice. It has to be used by itself. So for example, I rolled a 2 and a 5. If I were to flip this over to the 5, I can't combine it to take a 10. I have to use the 5 by itself on, say, the Rail Baron, or say the additional effort spot on Produce Resources. That's just the restriction. Moving on to the broker in Tycoon. The broker's simple. You get the stock token. The stock token is going to give you a chance to exchange for 3 resources or 1 gold at any time as needed. And a lot of people will turn this in for gold right away, but there's no reason to. You can do that later in the game. You can hold off because it's more tactical to hold on until you possibly need those resources to, say, build more track or build another town. You may not know when you need those additional resources. Moving on to Tycoon, you're going to get a gold and a rail. Pretty straightforward. You have to place that rail right away. You can't hold on to it. And finally, the market action space. It's at the very end of the track. Don't count on this for resources during that turn because it's the very last thing that happens. If you need gold or resources for the builder or the rail baron, you're not going to be able to claim it until the end. So be careful how you time this. It basically states pay any 3 resources to take 1, pay a gold to take any 3 resources, or pay any 6 to take 1 gold. You also notice that it requires 1 die in any die. So any die on this will allow you to claim it. It's unlimited. As many players as you want can take this. Where this action becomes very useful is towards the end of the game. Resources don't do anything for you at the end of the game, but if you can convert them into gold, then you can claim victory points out of them. So that is the basics behind all the action spaces. So let's go ahead and step back and talk a little bit more about the game in general. One thing you may have noticed that I did not talk about are the characters that come in the game. There's player characters. The cowboy, the banker, the scoundrel, the tracker, the merchant. For your very first couple games, I encourage you not to play with these characters, especially if you're new to Dice Euros or you're new to designer games in general. In fact, it's just easier to learn the game without the complexities of adding on these abilities. So I'm not going to talk about this in these characters in this video, but go ahead, refer to my longer tutorial video about all the information behind player characters. You'll also remember that I said we're not going to talk about in this video about the different icons that can happen on cards, except for the lightning bolt icon, because one of the things you have to pay attention to is the lightning bolt on the event cards. That means that they play immediately. The other thing is some of the frustrations early players may have is not gaining the proper resources. With the special setup with the ore resource hexes revealed in the center and the top and bottom row revealed, it doesn't usually become a problem. Also, don't forget, play in the safe zone. Just to know how to play the game, you need to start in the safe zone where those pre-printed food and wood hexes are, because if you're in this position, you're not that far away from one of the revealed ore resource hexes, and you'll never be frustrated by not having the proper resources. Later on when you play the game, you can go ahead and you can hide all the resource hexes and mix them up. And then you can start doing things like building in the dead center of this rugged territory. You'll notice that it's a little packed, a little tighter. So there's a benefit to building in that area, but you also don't know exactly what's there. So you could place your city in this position and it could be entirely surrounded by ore. And you're going to have a very hard time with the game unless you're familiar with taking things like loans or the trader action or taking the engineer token to manipulate your dice. So just be careful that you play in the safe zones, and you also pay attention to your tokens. You want to use your wild die tokens right away. Every time you roll a double, you want to go ahead and pick up a free wild die token. Like I said, there's limitations. You can only have as many limited tokens as you have cities. That engineer spot is very valuable once you know how to play the game. Another thing you want to be careful of is if you can't seem to roll, say, a 5 for the Rail Baron, taking bonus die and having those engineer tokens or even having the sheriff is very beneficial to manipulating the dice and trying to make it roll a 5 for you. So on that note, that's the basic strategies. Don't forget that the action cards are very powerful, and I hope you enjoy the game. If you ever have any questions, feel free to contact me. Have a great day.